Hey friends, welcome to Bokeh, a podcast exploring the ever-blurring lines between the personal and business lives of professional photographers. This is your host, Nathan Holritz, and I'm bringing you a special episode of the Bokeh Podcast today called Workflow Wednesday. During these special edition episodes, myself and my co-hosts will focus on helping you develop more efficient daily and weekly workflows around post-production, communication, task and project management, time management, file and image management, and yes, the list does go on. We're going to save you an incredible amount of time in your work week, and we promise not to be too nerdy. This podcast is brought to you by Photographers Edit, custom image editing for the wedding and portrait photographer. Visit photographersedit.com. All right, we are officially live. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining Workflow Wednesday. And I'm here with my good friend and colleague, Haylee Gaffin. Thank you, Haylee, for hanging out with me today for a little bit.
Yeah, no problem.
And as many of you probably know, Haylee actually does marketing work for Photographers Edit, but she's also a photographer. And Haylee, we said this last week, and I should remember off the top of my head, but it's HayleeGaffin.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so it's Hay. Actually, you know what? I think I'll just pop it up here on the screen for everybody. HayleeGaffin.
Yeah.
I thought I had your URL set up to go here, but we'll just pop your name up on the screen, and you guys just use that name and add .com to the end of it.
That's right.
But we are here to chat a little bit about workflow. And this is something that we do every Wednesday. It goes out to Facebook Live, facebook.com/photogsedit, PHOTOGSEDIT, for those of you who are listening in on the podcast. And then for those of you watching live, we also push this out to the Bokeh Podcast. And that's, let me just pop this up on the screen so everybody can see Bokeh Podcast. Of course, you can follow us on Instagram, but you can also go to bokehpodcast.com. And in addition to the Workflow Wednesday episodes, right now we're actually pushing out 2 episodes a week. Lots of helpful information and just good conversation with photographers from our industry. So go to Bokeh Podcast if you aren't listening in already. But this is an episode and ultimately a series that we're doing around the topic of workflow. We thought we'd make it a little bit more laid back, a little bit more conversational. And so today it's me and Haylee. Normally we'd have Rich and Heather Smith join us from Rich Smith Photography. They're having some technical issues today. So it's just going to be me and Haylee at this point, and we're going to try to rock this out. So today we're actually getting into a topic called, or more specifically, how to be productive when working from home. And of course, everything that we talk about here on Workflow Wednesday centers around workflow. It may sound a little bit nerdy, but the reality is literally everything that we do on a day-to-day basis as business owners is workflow in some form or fashion. And many, if maybe even not most photographers these days are at least at one point or another working from home. And so we thought we'd chat a little bit today about how to stay motivated working from home, because let's be real, like it's midday now, so noon Eastern, but not too many hours earlier, I might be in my PJs if I didn't have anywhere to go, anything specific, anybody to meet with, any conference calls to do. It's easy to just be really chill and relaxed at home, and because of that, many times it can be difficult to stay structured and ultimately to stay motivated. So we wanted to chat a little bit today about ways that we stay motivated and at least somewhat structured working from home in order to be able to get things done, be more productive, more consistently. And so that's what we're going to chat about today. But let's just catch up a little, Haylee, because I know you and I haven't chatted a whole lot this week. What's new in your world and what's going on with your photography business?
Well, a lot of fun things are happening. I'm talking to a few businesses about shooting their product and their shops for social media content, which has been really awesome and kind of the field I'm looking to get into to focus on. And yeah.
So a little bit more on the commercial side. I know that you've shot weddings and portraits, but moving in the commercial direction.
Yeah, I still have I have a wedding this October. So it's not that I'm completely letting it go, but I'm not actively pursuing weddings as much as I still love shooting couples, but I also really weddings are a lot of work.
They are a lot of work.
And so, I mean, I would love to shoot a couple of weddings a year, but there's no way I could do, 15 weddings a year on top of what I'm doing right now. So
yeah, seriously, kudos to all the wedding photographers out there who are still shooting 20, 30, 40, 50 weddings a year.
Blows my mind.
Yeah. I did about 40 a year for a couple of years. And that's just a lot, even 20 or 30, like that many, like basically half the weekends in a year you're out shooting, and in many cases for 10, 12, 14 hours at a time. It is extremely taxing. So I totally get where you're coming from there. Yeah. Are you, I know that you briefly mentioned to me before too, that in addition to commercial photography, you're going to kind of package that up with some marketing and branding work as well?
Yeah. That's the idea. It hasn't been finalized really, but okay. I tested out some Facebook ads with a few people, just trying to test the waters on what my workload could handle versus what is actually going to work best for a company who's just now starting out with their social media, and really making a package that is a one size fits all, but customizable to fit where you are in your business. So
yeah,
it's a challenge.
I have to give you props because, in addition to working full time for Photographers Edit, and sometimes at pretty crazy hours of the night, we were actually just joking before we started last night at, I don't know, was it like 9:30 or so? I started getting these notifications from our task and project manager, and I don't know, 7 or 8 in a row, something like that, because Haylee was sharing some stuff with me. So you work. First of all, you work really hard. You're very productive on your own, and you're self-sufficient, I guess is the best phrase to use there, which is always helpful for me. It means that, especially as a business owner and a manager, you always want to have employees or coworkers that you don't have to micromanage or babysit, if you will. I've had those experiences in the past, and it's ultimately more work than it is helpful. And so kudos to you for that. But what I was getting to here is the fact that some may say, how do you work full time for Photographers Edit and then also have time to help manage the marketing efforts of other companies? Because it is a lot of work in that case. Looks like we're freezing up a little bit. Can you still see me okay?
Yeah, you were freezing up a bit.
Okay. I think we're back on. We're good. Yeah. I'm going to make sure I don't have anything taking up bandwidth here. All right, so we're back at it. Good. But what I was getting at is you are managing a lot. You're juggling a lot, but you're doing very, very well at it. And I think this is a really great segue into what we're talking about today, because ultimately we have a lot of freedom and flexibility as running our own businesses to be able to get a lot done in a relatively short amount of time, still have a life left over afterward. If we are strategic in the way that we manage our day-to-day. And I know we've talked about this type of thing before in the podcast, but I really wanted to get specific today about how I'd like to hear from you. And I'm also going to share some ideas from my end as well that enable me to be productive. I want to hear a little bit about how you maintain productivity through the day, through the week, and ultimately manage as much as you do. Maybe you could share some of those big ideas that drive that ability for you.
Yeah, well, the first one kind of hits on what you were talking about a minute ago of being able to do so many things. I think working in the corporate world and having a side hustle helped set me up for that, because I would spend 45 minutes driving to work, and before that I spent an hour getting ready. So that's an hour and 45 minutes of my day that I now have, because I don't do that anymore. And then same coming home, 45 minutes driving home. It's very different. But when I was working in the corporate world, running my photography business on the side, I would go to work for, 40, 50 hours a week, because that's how it works in a salary position. So you'd go do that, and then I'd come home and I'd work all night long on photography, booking, social media, editing, whatever it might be. I was doing all of these things that would take up, 30, 45 hours of my personal time. And I will say, not having kids is a huge help for the time that I do have.
All those moms that are listening in, dads that are listening in, like, wait a minute, how in the world? Yeah, no, that's true. It really does make a big difference for sure.
Yeah, someone commented on our social media channels that it's summertime and her kids don't understand that she still has to work. And I was really hoping Rich and Heather would be able to join us, because I feel like they could really add to that.
That's true. I will say, even with my kids at home, my kids are 16 and 13, Austin and Addison, and we actually had the opportunity to take a day off yesterday. We went to Six Flags over Georgia and had a lot of fun. My girlfriend and her kids were there too. We just had a blast. But the normal day to day during the week, my son is now working, which is kind of a new concept in and of itself. He's 16. He got a job, but even the kind of the taxiing back and forth. Trying to time that and coordinate that also with music lessons for him, music lessons for Addison. Addison's also been attending a band function for the band in her middle school. And then of course, spending time with friends. And so I get to play, because my son's not quite driving on his own yet. I get to play taxi service. And it's interesting. I mean, ultimately, hashtag first world problems, right? But like trying to balance focused work with all the other personal stuff that you have going on, especially as a parent, can be a little bit of a challenge. It's very, very true that if you jump from task to task, it's hard to give it the attention that ultimately will mean the best results. So I empathize with the parents out there, for that matter, anybody that has a lot on their plate, especially mixing the personal and the business. But it is a wonderful thing to also have some of that freedom, that flexibility. I think you have 2 dogs and a cat, or 2 cats?
Yeah, 2 dogs and a cat, and they are my children, but they are not as much work.
Well, yeah, they can take up a lot of time and energy though too at times. But talk to us a little bit about some of the things that you're doing through the week that enable you to be able to manage all of this. And again, most people would be just overwhelmed with all that comes with your full-time gig with Photographers Edit. Then to add more on top of that, how do you stay motivated? And then I'd be curious maybe to kind of follow that up with how you manage to have enough space in there for yourself and for you and your husband to spend time together so that you don't get absolutely burnt out as well.
Yeah. So the first thing, and you may be able to see it, is I have created a space, and I'm still in the process of working on it. Like, I just got my final piece of furniture this week. But we took one of our spare bedrooms and turned it into an office, and which is awesome for writing off on your taxes. So that's one benefit, but it allows me to have a space to where I can shut the door and I don't have to think about all of the other things going on in the house. For me, it's in the process of becoming a place of inspiration, a place that makes me want to create and want to work hard for what I'm doing. And that is travel. So it's a travel inspired office. And
I'm putting up here, create a space on the screen, and I totally misspelled it for all those watching. Like, what in the world? This guy doesn't know how to spell, and he runs a company. Create a space, SPACE. Okay, with the E on the end. There you go.
I didn't see it, but I was going to ignore it.
I'm like, wow. I promised I had my coffee today. But it's an interesting point that you make too. The significance. How much you can save in your taxes just having one room that you can actually write off on your taxes, as long as it's actually dedicated to work, is a big deal.
Yeah, it is. This was last year was my first year writing off a home office, even though I've had one. Like, it's always been an office, but I've never been self-employed. So it was nice to have it to write off. I don't know.
Well, but then also, like you were pointing out, a space to go that's dedicated specifically for work. There's almost I'm amazed at the number of people that I read about or see online, especially on Facebook, that are posting, they're editing from their bed, or they're working from their bed. They're doing this thing or that thing there's something to be said for creating, as you're pointing out, a space dedicated to work. Yeah. Where not only can you separate that from, for example, your sleeping space, working in the same space that you sleep, unless you're in a situation where you just don't have any other rooms to work in. Working in a space that you sleep is not helping you shut down your mind at night, because now your body and your mind think, oh, what about that last thing that I was taking care of with work? It's in kind of a work mode, if you will. So separating that is really, really important for the sake of creating that mental shift, I think. Yeah. Not only for the sake of rest and peace at the end of the day, but then also focus when you're actually going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I won't say that I work in here every single day. There are plenty of times, I do get tired of being in the same space. So I'll go work in my kitchen, or if it's an awesome, beautiful morning, I'll go work on the back porch. But it is just nice to have a place that I can go and I can sit and focus and nothing's going to distract me. And I think that's probably the biggest piece of advice, is just creating that space, even if it's like a closet that works as an office. If it's tiny, it doesn't matter. Just makes a little corner for yourself. And then that kind of leads into my second tip, is to leave household work for personal time. I know when I first started working for Photographer's Edit, we didn't have the office really set up yet. And I was working in my kitchen pretty often, almost every day. And if there were, I think I've said this on one of our early workflow episodes, if there were dishes in the sink, it would bother me. Like, I would want to get up and go clean the dishes, or, whatever it might be. If there was something in the floor, I'd get up to go pick it up. And I just caught myself like doing household work when I should be working, and just eliminating the two, or creating that space, helps me to keep my household work during personal time.
Absolutely. Well, again, there is that significance of separation, and we were alluding to this earlier, but the significance of actual focused work versus, again, the other thing, and maybe you're going to touch on this too, but the multitasking that I also see happening in the photography industry. The number of people that talk about how they've got a movie playing in the background while they're editing or doing album design or otherwise. I just don't quite understand how, first of all, you expect to have much of a life left over, because now you're doing something that's going to take a lot more time because you have something distracting you in the background. So not only does it take away or affect the efficiency of the work that you're getting done, but then again, also the focus that you can actually give to that work. The multitasking doesn't help. And the same goes to what you're saying, the point that you're making, which is not to let the personal stuff kind of get in the way of whatever focus you can actually dedicate to your work. And maybe the compromise here, for those of you who are like, I can't manage to completely separate. I've got, 8 kids running around and they're doing all this stuff. I get it. That's fine. So maybe the compromise here that I'll just offer for those of you listening and who need a compromise would be something that we've talked about here on Bokeh before, which is the Pomodoro method. Rich actually has brought this up in the past, I think multiple times. And basically what it is just working in short segments of time. And so if you can give it 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes of focused, your work focused attention, then you're going to be able to get better work done. And then you can take a break for 5-10 minutes, do whatever personal stuff you want to do, or just go outside and run or do some push-ups or whatever it might be, get a snack, and then come back and again, give it that focused time. That might be a bit of a compromise for those who need it.
Yeah, that's actually part of my third tip
Cool. Perfect.
To reward yourself. So I do work in segments of time now. I didn't used to do it. It was just, I'd bounce back and forth from thing to thing and I'd never get anything done. It just became very convoluted and I'd feel like I worked on 100 things and nothing was done. And so I started rewarding myself. So for example, a podcast episode, if I am editing one, it could take between 2 and 3 hours. And this is where it's a little different than that method. But if I can sit down for 2 to 3 hours and edit an entire podcast episode, at the end, I'll take myself like a 30-minute break to go outside with my dogs and play. Because if you can focus for that long and you can get it done, then that's one thing that potentially if I had waited and done it, the old way I was doing it, it could take me 5-6 hours to do the same thing. But since I sat down and I had very focused time, there's no Facebook, no Instagram, no email during those 3 hours, then I can get it done in half the time that it normally would take me.
Yeah, and this reminds me of something actually, as we're talking about this, it may sound kind of ridiculous to some who are listening in. Maybe you're used to the corporate world, for example, where you go in, you've got 4 hours in the morning, you got a 30-minute lunch, and then you got another 4 hours straight of work, and then you go home. This idea that we're having a hard time focusing and we're working for 20 minutes and taking a 5-minute break sounds kind of ridiculous. But the reality is, at least based on the conversations that I've had with people and maybe even my own personal experience, people in the working in the corporate world at a desk, in a little cubicle or whatever the situation might be, many times aren't actually giving dedicated, focused attention and effort and energy to what they're doing. So it may be a little bit of work and then checking their text messages, and a little bit of work and then seeing what's coming up on Netflix, and a little bit of work and then doing a little bit of searching on Craigslist because you got to pick up something for your house, whatever it might be. But from what I hear, that is the more realistic scenario that's happening at work. So what we're talking about here is acknowledging the fact that our attention spans may be not the greatest. And I don't think that specifically has to do necessarily with modern culture and, cell phones and all the other stuff. I think there is something to be said for, if nothing else, the importance of movement for the sake of our physical health and even mental health and clarity. So the idea of working in shorter spurts of time and truly giving it focused attention and energy, and not multitasking, doing 5 things at once, getting up, taking a break, and coming back to it is really, really important. And I'm glad that you found that's worked well for you too.
Yeah. And to piggyback off what you said about corporate world, one thing when I first started working from home was I noticed in the corporate world, you have especially in advertising agency life, you have so many meetings. Half of my day could be in meetings and I was not getting any productive work done. And so for the first month of working from home, I felt like I was getting so much done, but exhausting myself to get it done. So having those rewards also helped, taking those breaks, because what I could get done in a week's time in a corporate job, I can get done in one day here, because there's so many distractions. People come up and talk to you. Yeah. And so I guess that kind of helped too, just because I couldn't get anything done in a corporate job in a smaller time frame, just because there are so many meetings. And with you, we only have this meeting and a meeting tomorrow. And that's really the only meetings I have in an entire week. So it's really nice to be able to sit and focus.
Yeah, I don't want to get into management practices a whole lot here, because it may not necessarily be relevant to most of our audience. But I think there is something to be said for, first of all, making sure that you hire the right people. I know some of our listeners may be in a situation where they have hired at least an admin assistant, maybe a second shooter. But first of all, hire people that you can trust to get the work done on their own. And then ideally, once the initial bit of training happens, keep it to minimal feedback after the fact and let them do their thing. And there's something to be said for that, because as you're pointing out, Haylee, you now have room to just focus on doing your job.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. To your point, you and I meet generally once a week before or after the Workflow Wednesday series. And then also on Thursdays, our team conference call. And we're kind of meeting virtually with our customer service and outreach team and yourself, myself, and sometimes our operations manager. And we get a chance to just connect, catch up on what's going on, look at numbers, any customer service issues that come up, review things that need to be done. I can add things to my to-do list, and we move on. And it works really well to do that once a week, because there is space for getting work done. But the corporate, I think there's a lot of room, actually. It'd be interesting to see the productivity level and even ultimately the profits that a large corporation could see with an increase in enabling people to work from home and on their own schedules, as long as they're getting the things done that they need to. It's an interesting conversation. We won't go too deep into it today, but anything else that you want to add to this, just to kind of finish things off?
Yes, just having a task management system. And we've had workflow episodes on this. You can go back and listen to those, but I used to be a to-do list person, and I still kind of am, pen and paper, but having a task management system to backlog, to have for this week's tasks, today's tasks, all of the things you need to know that you need to do so you don't forget them. I think it's really important, especially for photographers who do have multiple clients at any given time. Knowing where you are in that workflow, whether it's in your CRM that you have a task manager, or you go out and get one like Todoist or Asana. I think it's really important to keep that up.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm gonna pop up Todoist here on the the link to Todoist, Todoist.com. For those of you that don't use a task management system or task and project management system, Todoist is a really great place to get started. It doesn't cost you anything. It's clean, it's simple, it's easy to use. And again, it may seem a little bit on the nerdy side, but the reality is we all have so much to keep up with, and it doesn't make sense to keep it all in our head. I mean, speaking of habits that help us kind of relax and actually go to sleep at night, having a place to dump everything that's in your head and in a place that you can come back to. My friend Andreka, who's been on the podcast a number of times, she actually sent me a text message, I think it was yesterday, sent me a picture of all of her Post-it notes on her desktop, because she knows I'd like to give her a hard time about it. The reality is stuff like that can get lost. So having an electronic system that syncs to the cloud that you can access anywhere means that you can come back to that later on. You can rest peacefully and come back to work the next day and know that you can get to the things that need to be taken care of. So yeah, there is something significant to be said for something like Todoist. I'll add this note. And as Haylee mentioned too, we have dedicated probably multiple episodes at this point to this topic of task and project management. But so definitely go back. You can just do a quick search at bokehpodcast.com. I'll pop that up on the screen for those of you that are watching, BOKEHPODCAST.com. Make sure you go back and look at some of those episodes, because we get into the nitty gritty of how to manage tasks and projects, the significance of differentiating between the two, and ultimately how to be more productive using a task and project management system. So definitely check that out. But Mir, who is listening in, says hi. Hey, Mir, thanks for listening in and saying hey. And by the way, for those of you who are watching, don't hesitate to comment. If you have suggestions about how to be more productive working from home, would love to hear your thoughts, your tips, your tricks. Don't hesitate to comment, and we'll post those up on the screen and share with everybody. But I'm going to go ahead and jump into just sharing really quickly some of the ideas. I like ideas philosophy, because we can talk about tools, and we've done that. But in order to most effectively use those tools, there need to be a set of principles, values that drive what we do, so that we can ultimately work more consistently and more efficiently. And so I'm just going to share a few ideas that have enabled me to be more productive working from home. And I will say, number one, and we've kind of mentioned this already, but the idea of consistency is really, really important. And when I say consistency, maybe another word here is structure. But having a loose schedule that I go to day in and day out as kind of a guiding framework to drive me through my day is helpful. I'm a pretty disciplined guy, a pretty structured guy, but like anybody else working from home, running their own business, having that freedom and flexibility, it can be easy to get distracted. And so having a consistent schedule, ultimately a structure that drives me through my day, nothing where I'm micromanaging myself, because that would get really annoying really fast. But something that kind of guides me through my day, it's really helpful. And we've talked about this a little bit before on the podcast, and I think on Workflow Wednesday as well. But just very quickly, I'll briefly mention what would be my kind of ideal day-to-day workflow, my weekday workflow. It starts with a workout and then a review of my values, which are ultimately driving what I do day to day, week to week, month to month, and so on. Big picture stuff. And it just takes me a minute, not even that really, just to go back through them and remind myself of what I'm living for, what I'm working toward. Reading news, catching up on industry news, reading in a chapter in a self-help or a business book, just to continue to take information in, but not too much. There's a tendency, I think, in this day and age, to take in a lot of information and ultimately not use most of it. And I don't want to fall into that trap. So it's important to take the information in, but not to overdo it. Make sure that I'm then applying it. And then creating, being artistic or creative, giving myself space to work on a new project, whether it's for Photographer's Edit, or another business that I may be putting together, giving myself some space to be creative. That motivates me. That gives me something to look forward to. The reality is, at the end of the day, even if most of our day is spent doing things that are proactive in nature, we've talked about this concept before, there may be a few mundane things that you have to get to that it's not your favorite thing to do. I don't want to spend a lot of time doing that, but to start off my day with something that is exciting, that enables me to create, be artistic, be creative, is really important to me. So I give myself space for that. And then I jump to the three most important tasks. I'm going to touch on this here in just a second, but time dedicated to big proactive tasks that are moving my company forward, focusing on that. Some time to meditate, focus on then creating content for ads, Facebook ads, social media ads, and some of the other marketing work that we're doing. Communication, so that focuses around communication with my team, Haylee, our development team, and so forth through our task and project manager, Todoist. Email, social media, Facebook groups. There's a time in the afternoon that is dedicated to communication, phone calls if I need to make them. And then at the end of the day, the goal then would be to set up my 3 MITs, most important tasks for the following day. And that's how my day kind of ends. So there is a lot of, there is some structure to that. It sounds like a lot of steps, but it still gives me a lot of freedom, a lot of flexibility within that relatively loose structure, to not feel kind of overwhelmed with the micromanagement, but enough structure to kind of push me through my day. And that's really helpful. The antithesis to that, and my next point, would be the idea of variety. And it may seem kind of ironic. I just talked about structure and the idea of doing something consistently. But variety, then I need variety for the sake of not getting burnt out doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. Yeah. So, the goal would be to consistently follow through with that structure that I just described, maybe 80% of the time. And then if occasionally I want to break that and go take a motorcycle ride just to clear my mind, or get a workout in the middle of the day, again, to clear my mind and take care of my body. Or maybe, drive to see my girlfriend for an hour or two. She just moved up to the area, and we've had the opportunity to spend a little bit more time together. And that's kind of nice. But I have the freedom, the flexibility to be able to do that as a business owner. And I can't do that kind of stuff all the time. I'm not going to get the work done that I need to, but I have that. And to take advantage of that for the sake of variety, for the sake of breaking up any potential monotony, I think is really, really important. So that would be the next point. And then after that, and I alluded to this already, but something else that has really helped for me is an intense morning workout. And we talked about the significance of taking care of our health as photographers on the podcast, on the Workflow Wednesday series, actually, a little while back. So you can do a search for that. But there is something to be said for jumping into, at least for me anyway, jumping into my day with a really intense workout. For me, it's a 20-minute high-intensity interval session on the elliptical machine, followed up with some heavy lifting. And this just gets me moving, the blood flowing, and it's kind of exhilarating, honestly. And it feels good to go from that into whatever work that I need to get done for the day, or to my daily schedule. That really drives me. And to not do that consistently, ultimately, I kind of feel bleh, just a little bit lazy almost even. And so I've really, really enjoyed that. And that makes a big difference for me. And I know a lot of people would argue, well, I'm not a morning person. I get it. So maybe start just a little bit later in the day. But I know, A, that it's going to help boost my energy level and help push me through my day. And 2, if I push it to later in the day, the likelihood of me getting that workout in is lower. And so that makes a big difference for me. I know I'm talking a lot, Haylee. I don't want to just kind of ramble on. Do you have anything to add to the conversation thus far, those first 3 points?
Well, I think we talked about this on that health episode, but yeah. I'm what you're talking about. I'm a morning person, but I'm not a let me go work out in the morning person. So I'm definitely a night workout person. Okay. I'd rather work out at night and then crash.
And there's actually, from what I understand, there is something to be said for that. Having a hard workout 2 to 3 hours before bedtime apparently makes a difference in the quality of sleep or ability to be able to sleep well. From what I understand, this is something I actually just heard the other day, maybe for the second or third time, but it's kind of an interesting point of conversation. So kudos to you for having the discipline to actually get it done later on in the day when you're maybe feeling a little bit tired. But I totally feel you on that. Yeah. And this is kind of a funny segue, but I'm going to actually jump to my next point. And as much as we're talking about how to be productive working at home, I'm going to say not working at home is actually something that helps me stay productive. And this may seem kind of funny. I'm going to pop this up on the screen here. It may seem kind of funny, but ultimately, again, to my earlier point about variety, not being in the same space, especially my apartment, which gets really, really quiet, especially if my kids are not around. And that's great for the sake of focused work. But I like to break things up, have a bit of variety, and I like to be around people at the end of the day. And so even doing something as simple as going to a coffee shop, and we've got a number of them in the area, which are really nice. Again, for the sake of variety, I can go to different places, ride my motorcycle to the coffee shop. In fact, we'll be doing this tomorrow for our weekly Chattanooga photographers get together. We got this really kind of funky place called Frothy Monkey. It's a hilarious name, but a really great little spot to go sit and hang out with other photographers, get a little bit of work done, and have some great food. But I can get out, and that breaks up the monotony. And so not working at home all the time is also, there's something to be said for how variety actually encourages creativity. Being in a different environment encourages creativity, and it's actually quite helpful for me. And so I enjoy that. And so that would be my next point. We talked about task managers, and I'll go ahead and put this up on the screen as well. But keeping my to-do list short. This is something that is, for me, makes a big difference. Right now, actually, my today list, my daily work list, the MIT list has grown quite long. It's not 3 items. And that ultimately, seeing that long of a list can be overwhelming for me. And then there's a tendency that we have as photographers, business owners, to see, and for that matter, as humans, to actually see a big project and just get overwhelmed by it. And again, to this point about motivation, not have the motivation to go get that thing done. So taking it a few steps at a time, focusing on one big thing that is going to make a big difference in my business. It's proactive in nature. It's moving my business forward. Just having 2 or 3 of those on a list for the day to focus on, to give it just really great energy and attention to, can make a big difference in the level of productivity, the motivation that drives that productivity. And I think that's really, really important as well. So to that point, I need to actually go back after we finish our conversation and cull through that list and make some tweaks, some adjustments to it. But that is helpful for me. And do you find that that's the case, Haylee, for you as well?
Well, it depends. I've started implementing that into, like, I have a to-do list, and then I'll prioritize the top 3. Yeah. And those are the 3 I have to accomplish today. And then if I can get to the other ones, that's great. So like this week, currently, it's for the last 3 days, it's been edit 1 podcast every day. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, edit 1 podcast. And then on my second task for the day is we're working on our email automation. So whether it's, finalize, get approval, or whatever it might be, make adjustments, that's my second task on those 3 days. And then also social media, just making sure everything, like our Instagram stories, are active, because there was a time when we were putting out this many episodes and I was falling behind on social media, and I could tell. So I'm not sure if everyone else could, but I was like, man, I haven't posted an Instagram story in like 4 days. So that's one of those things, like just making sure we are active. But for me, you mentioned working at coffee shops or other places that are not home. I have a hard time focusing. So like work that has to require a lot of attention, I can't do outside of the house. But like social media, for me, that's one of those, like, you could multitask with it. So I can sit and watch what's going on around me, but still be working. Whereas
because a lot of that social media, you have the content. It's just a matter of kind of packaging it up to put it out on social media, right? So you're not having to think creatively to create it as much as just put it all together. Almost busy work. But yeah, I totally feel you on that. I'm actually very similar. I like to be able to be in a space, especially if I have some busy work to get done, where there is that background noise of being around people, hearing the buzz, the coffee machines, whatever. But yeah, for really focused work, I'm definitely with you. It's nice to be able to have quiet. In fact, my kids are just music obsessed, and I love it. I mean, they both play and listen to music very, very actively. I'm not very good about listening to music when I need to get focused work done.
Well, I think we lost Nathan. Well, I'm going to stay on here and try talking. Oh. Hopefully he'll be back.
Am I back?
You're back.
Oh man, that was really weird.
Awkward.
It tried to sign us off. Thanks for carrying the show there for a second.
Oh man.
I think I was talking too much. They were just like, forget him. He's talking too much. He's rambling on. We'll actually get to the last point here really quickly, and it's really something that I've already alluded to throughout our conversation, but the significance of working in short amounts of time. We talked about the Pomodoro technique, working in 25 to 30 minute segments and then taking a short break and then going back. Of course, the key there is getting focused work done. If you're sitting around playing on social media while you're also doing something else, and that's your 20, 25, 30 minutes work segment, shame on you. You need to get dialed in.
Yeah.
So focused short spurts of work, I think, are a great way to go, at least for me. And I can really dive in. And this tends to be how I work in just in my life in general. So I know that about myself. And this is one of those things where I don't think I need to change it a whole lot because I know I can get stuff done. So understanding how I work, catering to that a little bit, working in short spurts of time is helpful for me. And then I can, whether it's a 5-minute break or I take an hour, like I said, and get out and ride the bike or whatever it might be, I can still get my work done for the day. But taking that break is a way of both enjoying what it means to be an entrepreneur, at least from my perspective, and also clearing my head for the sake of maximum focus or maximum creativity, being able to give more to my business. Really, ultimately, I think that's really, really important. So that's just some ideas that work for me. Anything that you want to add as we kind of close this conversation?
Yeah, I think I've mentioned this before in a previous episode, but I started planning out my days. Well, I tried doing it on Sunday nights so I'm not doing it Monday morning. I can dive right into work. But one thing is just adjusting your days throughout the week. And I time block similar to that, where I'll go into my calendar and I'll mark off, I know it's going to take 3 hours for me to edit this podcast. If I start at 8 a.m., I can finish by 11 a.m. Had to do that math real fast. I can finish by 11 a.m. And then I found that my most productive time is in the morning. So if I get all of my focus tasks done in the morning, by like 3 p.m., I'm losing my productivity up until like around 6 o'clock. I can jump back in. And a lot of times that's what I'll do is I'll take a break during the day. And I know that from 6 to 9, if my personal life is dead, I can jump in. Like, my husband works night shifts, so there are half the nights of the week he is gone working. So I can take that time and work. It's really what's best for you. But time blocking has helped me to stay on task and know what I have to do for the week, and if there is enough time to get everything I need to do done.
Yeah, well, it's not only the time blocking, but I'm glad that you make that point again about being aware of how you function best. So at a certain time of the day, about 3 o'clock or so, your body's starting to wind down. Your mind has been worked hard enough, and it's like, I don't really want to be in this anymore. So at that point, again, that's a good time to handle busy work that doesn't require a whole lot of creative thought. But there is something to be said, significant to be said, for understanding how you best work and catering your schedule to that. And there again is why I would suggest starting the day with something that is proactive in nature, or multiple tasks that are proactive in nature that are moving your business forward. So if for some reason, listeners, photographers that are listening in, if for some reason, midway through the day, you're just done with it, that you've at least gotten multiple things done for the sake of the growth of your business, for moving your business forward. And then there is nothing wrong with taking advantage of the freedom, the flexibility that you've generated as a result of implementing some of the structure that we're talking about. And that's ultimately why this stuff even matters. Yeah. I've spent almost 20 years in the industry, and there have been way too many conversations with photographers that are talking about how they're working until, or seeing conversations online that are talking about working till all hours of the night, staying up editing. I mean, especially for business owners that have been in the business for a long time, and they're still just repeating these same habits over and over and over again. They likely will have families too. Mm-hmm. So not only is it hurting them because they're not getting sleep, it's burning them out because they're constantly working and not efficiently. But it's also taking away from time with the important people in their life. And what we want to encourage with this series is to consider ways that you can make your day-to-day workflow more efficient so that you can have more freedom and flexibility in your life as an entrepreneur. That Photographer's Edit is ultimately offering. It looks like I'm freezing up again. No, there we go. We're back. But that's what Photographer's Edit offers through our editing service. Yes, we offer custom editing for wedding and portrait photographers, but ultimately we're giving you your life back. That is the real value there. We're giving you hours and hours of time back. Mm-hmm. But I realize there's still other things that you can't outsource to Photographer's Edit. And if you are going to be managing that stuff yourself, there are ways to get those things done efficiently. That's what the purpose of this Workflow Wednesday series is. And to that point, as we close out here, do make sure if you're listening on the Bokeh Podcast, you can go to bokehpodcast.com and go back and listen to some of the older episodes. We've covered a wide variety of topics around workflow, including our health. We talked about health today. We even got into health a little bit, how to manage that efficiently. But you can go to bokehpodcast.com to listen to the old episodes. We'll link you to some of the most popular podcast players that were on there. And then for those of you who are watching on live, or you're listening in the podcast and you want to go to watch the live stream, it's just facebook.com. And I'll pop this up on the screen really quick. Facebook.com/photogsedit, PHOTOGSEDIT. Facebook.com/photogsedit. Of course, we're watching this. You're probably already there, but you can go back and watch the old videos and learn more about how to work efficiently so that you've got more freedom and flexibility in your life. So I think that's it, Haylee. Thank you for sharing all your workflow tips. And again, major kudos to you. I think I've said this to you off the air, but on air, for the record, I have to give you props for your productivity. I mean, it's really impressive. And ultimately, for somebody who has so much on their plate, you do it well. And thank you for sharing the tips, the tricks that enable you to do some of that stuff. Really, really good.
Awesome. Well, this was fun.
All right. Well, everybody, thanks for joining in, for listening in, for watching. Have an absolutely wonderful Wednesday. Thank you so much for listening to the Bokeh Podcast. Will you let us know what you thought by leaving a review of the podcast in iTunes or the Apple Podcast app? And I'd love to hear from you personally with your thoughts about the podcast and maybe suggestions about future topics and guests for the show. My email is nathan@photographersedit.com. The Bokeh Podcast is brought to you by Photographers Edit, custom image editing for the wedding and portrait photographer. Visit photographersedit.com.